October 7th, 1944. 15 kilometers south of The Hague, occupied Netherlands. Pieter Van Dijk lies flat in wet grass beside a drainage ditch, watching headlights approach through pre-dawn darkness. 3 vehicles moving slowly along the coastal road. First, a Kubelwagen reconnaissance car, its machine gun mount visible in silhouette. Second, a massive Mealerwagen transporter, 30 meters long, carrying something angular and enormous beneath canvas covers. Third, another Kubelwagen trailing behind, maintaining security distance. Pieter knows exactly what's under that canvas. He's seen these convoys before. A Vergeltungswaffe 2 rocket, Vengeance Weapon 2, the V-2 ballistic missile, 13 meters tall, 14 tons fully fueled, carrying a 1-ton warhead that can hit London in 5 minutes from launch. This convoy is moving from the assembly facility at Scheveningen to a mobile launch site somewhere in the dunes. By tomorrow morning, that rocket will kill dozens of civilians in England. The convoy passes within 50 meters of Pieter's position. He can hear the Mealerwagen's diesel engine straining under the load, the squeal of overtaxed suspension, the sharp commands of the SS escort troops. He remains absolutely still. The wet grass soaks through his jacket, cold October rain running down his collar. He's been lying here for 3 hours, waiting, watching, memorizing every detail. Pieter is 41 years old, a senior lineman for the Netherlands Elektriciteit Maatschappij, the Dutch National Electric Company. For 19 years, he's maintained high-voltage transmission lines across Holland. He knows every power station, every substation, every kilometer of cable between Rotterdam and Amsterdam. He knows voltage ratings, transformer capacities, circuit protection systems. He knows exactly how much current flows through the coastal grid that powers German military installations. What the Germans don't know, what they can't possibly suspect as their convoy rolls past, is that Pieter has been mapping their electrical infrastructure for 8 months. Every V-2 launch site requires massive amounts of power. The fueling equipment, the hydraulic erectors, the radio guidance systems, all need electricity. The Germans tap into Dutch transmission lines, installing their own substations and distribution panels. They think they're being clever, using existing infrastructure instead of running generators that might attract Allied bombers. They've made a fatal mistake. They've connected their Vengeance weapons program to a power grid maintained by a man who understands electricity better than any SS engineer, and who lost his daughter to a V-2 strike on Antwerp 3 weeks ago. Pieter has spent those 3 weeks designing something the Germans have never encountered. Not a bombing, not sabotage in the conventional sense, something more elegant. He's going to use their own power requirements against them. He's going to create a backfeed condition, a deliberate electrical fault that will send 10,000 volts through equipment designed for 220, and he's going to do it at the precise moment a V-2 is being fueled on its launch platform. The convoy disappears into darkness, heading northwest toward the coast. Pieter rises slowly, joints stiff from cold and stillness. He has perhaps 6 hours before that rocket is erected and ready for fueling. 6 hours to hike 8 kilometers through occupied territory, access a specific electrical substation, install his modification, and activate it at exactly the right moment. He's planned this for weeks, rehearsed every step, calculated every voltage, every timing sequence. The mathematics are perfect. The execution will be dangerous, possibly suicidal, but Pieter stopped caring about personal safety the moment he identified his daughter's body in what remained of a Rotterdam apartment building. He checks his watch. 0447 hours. The Germans like to launch rockets just after dawn, using early morning light to verify trajectories before the missiles climb above the clouds. That gives him until approximately 0630 to be in position. Pieter hefts his tool bag, heavy with specialized equipment that looks exactly like standard electrical maintenance gear, because that's exactly what it is. Wire cutters, insulated gloves, voltage testers, jumper cables. Nothing suspicious. Nothing a lineman wouldn't carry. The only unusual items are hidden in a false bottom of the bag. 6 meters of heavy-gauge copper cable, 3 ceramic insulators, a mechanical timer salvaged from a washing machine, and detailed schematics of the German electrical installation at Launch Site Vier, hand-drawn over months of careful observation. Pieter begins walking north, parallel to the coastal road but staying well inside the tree line. The rain continues, cold and steady. Good. Rain means reduced visibility, fewer patrols. German soldiers staying inside their vehicles instead of walking perimeters. He's done this kind of work before, but never anything this ambitious. Since the occupation began in May 1940, Pieter has been quietly resistant. Small acts, deliberately slow repairs to German installations, accidentally miscalculating voltage requirements so equipment fails prematurely, nothing dramatic enough to attract attention. Just a competent lineman who seems to make minor mistakes that somehow always disadvantage the occupiers. The local resistance knows about Pieter, trusts him, uses him occasionally for intelligence. He reports on German electrical installations, providing information about power consumption that helps resistance planners understand what facilities are operating where. But Pieter isn't a fighter. He doesn't blow up bridges or ambush patrols. He's a technician who understands that sometimes the most effective sabotage isn't explosions, it's electrons moving in exactly the wrong direction at precisely the wrong time. Understanding Pieter's plan requires understanding electrical backfeed, a condition that occurs when power flows backward through a system designed for unidirectional current. Normal electrical distribution works like water in pipes. Power flows from generators at high voltage, steps down through transformers to lower voltages, and distributes to end users. The system includes protective devices, circuit breakers, and fuses that trip if current flows in unexpected directions or exceeds safe levels. But protective devices can be bypassed if you know how. And Pieter knows how. The German V2 launch installations tap into the Dutch grid at 11,000 volts, step it down through their own transformers to 420 volts for their equipment. Standard industrial power. The German engineers installed their connections competently, including proper circuit protection. Under normal circumstances, if something goes wrong, the breakers trip and the system shuts down safely. Pieter's plan is to create abnormal circumstances. He's going to connect the German installation to 2 different parts of the grid simultaneously, creating a phase difference that will cause current to circulate between the 2 sources. This circulating current will overwhelm the German equipment, but it won't trip their circuit breakers because the breakers can't detect the specific fault condition Pieter is creating. The result will be catastrophic equipment failure. Every electric motor, every control system, every piece of German technology connected to the power supply will experience massive overvoltage. Fuel pumps will burn out, hydraulic systems will fail, radio equipment will explode. And if Pieter's timing is correct, if he activates the backfeed condition while the V2 is being fueled with liquid oxygen and ethanol, the resulting electrical fires will ignite propellant vapors. He's not trying to destroy the rocket with explosives. He's trying to make the rocket destroy itself using the electrical systems the Germans depend on. The technical challenge is timing. Pieter needs to know exactly when the fueling operation begins. Too early, and the Germans simply shut down, investigate the power failure, and launch the rocket later. Too late, and the rocket is already fueled and ready for launch. He needs to activate the backfeed during the 30-minute window, when fuel is actively flowing, when vapors are present, when electrical sparks will cause ignition. He has a source inside the launch operations. Not a spy, not a resistance fighter. A Dutch woman named Anna Koers, who cooks for the German troops at Launch Site Vier. Anna is 62 years old, completely unthreatening, someone the Germans barely notice. She serves breakfast to the launch crews every morning. She hears the officers discussing schedules. 3 days ago, she mentioned to Pieter during a chance encounter at the market, that the crews were talking about an early launch on October 7th. Before 0700 hours, it was the only intelligence Pieter needed. He cross-referenced German launch patterns, weather forecasts, convoy movements. Everything pointed to a launch at approximately 0630 on October 7th. From Launch Site Vier, located in the dunes 3 kilometers north of Katwijk, the launch site receives power from substation Katwijk West, a small facility containing transformers and distribution equipment serving the coastal region. Pieter has maintained that substation for 12 years. He knows every cable, every connection point, every protective device. More importantly, he knows the substation also has a secondary feed from a different part of the grid, normally kept isolated but physically present. That secondary feed is his weapon. Pieter reaches the substation at 0532 hours. The building is dark, surrounded by a chain-link fence. No guards. The Germans don't bother securing every minor electrical facility. They have patrols that pass by periodically, but the substation itself is just another piece of civilian infrastructure. He approaches the gate and pulls out his key ring. He still has keys to every NEM facility in the region. The Germans never thought to confiscate them. Why would they? Linemen need access to substations to maintain power for German installations. The gate opens silently. Pieter crosses the compound to the main building, unlocks the door, and enters. Inside, the air smells of transformer oil and ozone. Banks of equipment line the walls. Heavy cables snake across the ceiling. Everything is exactly as Pieter remembers from his last legitimate maintenance visit 6 weeks ago. He sets down his tool bag and removes a small flashlight, keeping the beam pointed downward to avoid light escaping through windows. He moves to the main distribution panel, identifying circuits by memory. Circuit 7 feeds German installations to the north, including Launch Site Vier. Circuit 14 is the isolated secondary feed, normally inactive. Pieter opens his tool bag and removes the copper cable and ceramic insulators. He's about to create a connection that violates every electrical safety protocol ever written. He's going to bypass protective devices, link 2 circuits that should never be connected, and create conditions that will cause massive fault current to flow through German equipment. First, he needs to install the mechanical timer. This is critical. He can't activate the backfeed immediately because he doesn't know the exact moment fueling begins. Instead, he'll set the timer to close the connection at 06:15 hours, 15 minutes before the expected launch time. Based on German procedures he's observed, fueling typically begins 30 minutes before launch. 06:15 should be optimal timing. Midway through the fueling operation, Pieter mounts the timer mechanism to the panel, concealing it behind legitimate electrical equipment where casual inspection won't reveal it. He connects the timer to a heavy-duty relay that will physically close the circuit connection when activated. The relay is rated for 50 amps. The fault current he's about to create will be closer to 200 amps. The relay will weld itself shut within seconds, making the connection permanent until someone physically removes it. That's the beauty of the design. Once activated, the backfeed condition can't be easily stopped. The Germans will have to shut down power to the entire region, locate the fault, and physically disconnect Pieter's modification. That will take hours. By then, the launch operation will be thoroughly disrupted. Now comes the dangerous part. Pieter must connect the copper cable between Circuit 7 and Circuit 14, creating the physical pathway for backfeed current. The circuits are currently de-energized at this connection point, but they're still part of a live system. Any mistake, any accidental contact with energized components, and Pieter will experience 11,000 volts. Instant death. He pulls on insulated gloves, thick rubber rated for high voltage work. He tests them carefully, checking for any tears or weak points. Satisfied, he removes the cover plates from both circuits, exposing the heavy copper bus bars beneath. The bus bars gleam dully in his flashlight beam. Each one carries enough current to vaporize a wrench if metal touches between phases. Pieter has worked around high voltage for 19 years. He's seen 3 men die from electrical contact. 2 were careless. 1 was simply unlucky, touched something that shouldn't have been energized, but was due to a wiring error. Pieter is never careless. He double-checks every connection, every circuit, every potential path for current to flow where it shouldn't. He uses his voltage tester, confirming that the specific points where he's working are at 0 potential. The tester shows safe. He proceeds. He attaches the copper cable to circuit 7's bus bar using a heavy-duty clamp. The connection must be solid, capable of carrying fault current without overheating. He tightens the clamp with a torque wrench, applying exactly the manufacturer's specified pressure. Too loose, and the connection will arc. Too tight, and he might crack the insulator supporting the bus bar. The first connection complete. Pieter routes the copper cable across the panel to circuit 14. He installs ceramic insulators at 2 points, keeping the cable physically separated from the metal panel. The insulators are critical. Any contact between the energized cable and grounded metal will create an immediate fault, triggering every circuit breaker in the substation. He makes the second connection to circuit 14's bus bar, again using the torque wrench to ensure proper tightness. The copper cable now bridges the 2 circuits, but the relay controlled by the timer is still open. No current flows. The backfeed pathway exists, but remains inactive. Pieter installs a final safety measure, a knife switch that will allow him to manually disconnect the system if something goes wrong. If German patrols arrive early, if the launch is delayed, if anything deviates from the plan, he can throw the switch and abort. He checks his watch. 05:53 hours. 37 minutes until launch time. 22 minutes until the timer activates the backfeed. Pieter sets the timer carefully, rotating the mechanical dial to 06:15 hours. The timer is a simple clockwork mechanism, completely reliable, impossible to jam or interfere with remotely. Once set, it will activate precisely when programmed. He steps back and reviews his work. The installation looks almost legitimate, like a temporary maintenance connection. Any German engineer inspecting the substation would need several minutes to understand what they're seeing, and by then the timer will have activated, and the backfeed condition will be destroying their equipment. Pieter carefully replaces the panel covers, concealing his modifications. He collects his tools, leaving no evidence of his presence. The substation appears exactly as it did when he entered, almost time. He moves to the window facing north, toward the coast where Launch Site Vier is located. Through the darkness and rain, he can see nothing. The launch site is too far away, hidden behind dunes and trees. But he knows it's there. Knows the Germans are preparing their vengeance weapon. Knows they're running through pre-launch checklists. Completely unaware that their electrical system has been compromised, Pieter allows himself a moment of cold satisfaction. His daughter was 19 years old, studying medicine at Rotterdam University, planning to become a surgeon. The V2 that killed her struck without warning on September 14th. One moment, Rotterdam was an occupied city going about its miserable daily existence. The next moment, 1,300 kilograms of high explosive detonated at supersonic speed. The building where his daughter lived simply ceased to exist. 16 people died. 47 were wounded. The Germans called it a military necessity, retaliation for Allied bombing of German cities. Pieter called it murder. And he spent 3 weeks planning his response. 06:03 hours. The timer ticks steadily in the darkness. 12 minutes until activation. Pieter positions himself where he can see both the panel and the northern horizon. If everything works as designed, he'll see evidence of success. Fires, explosions, something visible from this distance. If nothing happens, if his calculations are wrong, if the Germans have installed protective devices he doesn't know about, then he's accomplished nothing but his own eventual arrest and execution. The Germans will find his modifications eventually. When they do, they'll investigate, trace the work to someone with electrical expertise, someone with access to this substation. His NEM supervisor, a collaborator named Henk Visser, will provide his name immediately. Pieter has no illusions about loyalty. Visser has been helpful to the Germans throughout the occupation, eager to maintain his position and privileges. But Pieter accepted that risk weeks ago. When he started this plan, he wrote a letter to his wife, explaining everything. The letter is hidden in their home, with instructions not to open it unless he fails to return. His wife, Maria, knows he's involved in something dangerous. She doesn't know details, doesn't want to know. She lost her daughter too. She understands grief-driven rage even if she can't condone it. 0611 hours. 4 minutes until the timer closes the relay and activates the backfeed. Pieter realizes his hands are shaking, not from fear, from anticipation. For 3 weeks, he's imagined this moment. Calculated, planned, prepared. Now it comes down to mechanical timers and electrical physics. Either his understanding of power systems is correct and the backfeed will destroy German equipment, or he's made an error somewhere in his calculations and nothing will happen. 0613 hours. In the distance, toward the coast, Pieter sees lights. Vehicle headlights moving along the road toward the launch site. Probably the final security sweep before launch operations begin. The Germans are meticulous about security during launches. They establish a perimeter extending 2 kilometers from the launch point, evacuating any Dutch civilians in the area, positioning troops to prevent observation. 0614 hours. Somewhere at Launch Site Vier, German technicians are connecting fuel lines to the V-2 rocket. The Miller wagon has erected the missile to vertical position using hydraulic rams. Electric pumps are preparing to transfer liquid oxygen at -183 degrees Celsius from insulated tanks into the rocket's fuel system. Other pumps will feed ethanol. The propellants must be loaded in precise sequence, maintaining specific ratios, monitored by electrical sensors feeding data to control panels. All of it dependent on reliable electrical power. 0615 hours. The timer mechanism releases. Somewhere in the darkness of the substation, a relay closes with an audible snap. Circuit 7 and Circuit 14 are now connected through Pieter's copper cable bridge. For 3 seconds, nothing visible happens. But Pieter knows that in those 3 seconds, the electrical physics he's carefully orchestrated are unfolding at the speed of light. Circuit 7, fed from the northern part of the grid, is carrying current at a specific phase angle. Circuit 14, fed from the eastern grid, is carrying current at a different phase angle. The two sources are out of sync by approximately 90 degrees. When the relay closes, the phase difference causes massive circulating current to flow between the two sources, seeking equilibrium. That current, easily 200 amps, surges through every piece of German equipment connected to the system. Electric motors experience instantaneous overvoltage. Their windings, designed for 420 volts, suddenly encounter 800 volts as the two out-of-phase sources combine. The motors don't trip breakers because the current isn't flowing through normal paths. The breakers can't detect the fault. Instead, the motors simply burn. Insulation fails in microseconds. Windings short-circuit, generating intense heat. Within 10 seconds of the relay closing, every electric motor at Launch Site Vier is on fire. 0615 hours and 27 seconds. Pieter sees the first visible sign. A red glow appears on the northern horizon, rapidly intensifying. Fire, and lots of it. The Germans are experiencing catastrophic equipment failure. But Pieter needs more than equipment failure. He needs the propellant to ignite. Liquid oxygen and ethanol vapor in the presence of electrical sparks. The fuel pumps burning out should provide sparks. unless the Germans react quickly enough to shut down fueling operations before vapor concentrations reach combustible levels. "Come on," Peter whispers to the darkness. "Burn. 0616 hours. The red glow brightens suddenly, and Peter hears it. Even at 8 kilometers distance, he hears the detonation. Not a single explosion. A rolling series of blasts as propellant tanks rupture and ignite in sequence. Liquid oxygen vaporizes explosively when heated. Ethanol vapor ignites at temperatures easily exceeded by electrical fires. The combination is devastating. Through the substation window, Peter watches a fireball climb into the pre-dawn sky, orange and red and brilliant white, expanding upward like a miniature sun rising from the coastal dunes. The fireball reaches perhaps 300 meters altitude before dissipating into a rolling cloud of black smoke. Secondary explosions follow. Smaller detonations, probably fuel trucks and supply vehicles parked near the launch site. The Germans maintain substantial propellant reserves at each launch facility. Mobile tanks, each containing thousands of liters of ethanol and liquid oxygen. When the primary explosion engulfs the launch site, those reserve tanks rupture. The explosions continue for nearly 2 minutes. Peter counts 8 distinct major detonations, each sending fresh fireballs skyward. The northern horizon looks like daylight, harsh orange light illuminating the rain clouds. Then, abruptly, a different sound. A deep, ground-shaking roar that Peter feels in his chest before he consciously hears it. The V-2 rocket itself, its fuel tanks rupturing under heat stress. 13 tons of pressurized propellant, releasing in a single catastrophic failure. The explosion is enormous. Visible flash even at 8 kilometers distance, bright enough to hurt Peter's eyes. The shockwave arrives 7 seconds later, rattling windows in the substation, causing the building's metal roof to flex and boom. When Peter's vision clears, the northern horizon is obscured by a massive pillar of smoke rising thousands of meters into the sky. The launch site is gone. The rocket is gone. Everything within hundreds of meters of the launch platform has been incinerated or scattered by blast effects. Peter allows himself to breathe. His hands stop shaking. He closes his eyes briefly, seeing his daughter's face. 19 years old. Always smiling, always optimistic despite the occupation. Gone in an instant because of German weapons that strike without warning. One rocket won't reach London today. 1 ton of high explosive won't fall on civilians who never see it coming. 13 meters of precision engineering designed solely to deliver terror is now scattered metal fragments and chemical residue across Dutch coastal dunes. It's not enough. It doesn't bring his daughter back. But it's something. 0618 hours. Pieter can hear sirens now, distant but approaching. German emergency response vehicles racing toward the launch site. They'll find destruction but won't understand the cause immediately. Propellant explosion during fueling. Probably. Accident. Maybe sabotage. Impossible to determine with the launch site destroyed. Eventually, they'll investigate the electrical system. They'll find Peter's modifications in the substation. But that will take hours, maybe days. By then, Peter will be home, filing a routine maintenance report, acting completely normal. He throws the knife switch, disconnecting the backfeed circuit. The relay has already welded shut from the fault current, but opening the knife switch provides a second breakpoint, ensuring no further current flows. He removes the timer mechanism, pockets it, evidence that must disappear. He leaves the copper cable and relay in place. Removing them would take time he doesn't have, and their presence doesn't definitively prove sabotage. Could be explained as a maintenance error, a misguided attempt to provide backup power. Pieter collects his tool bag and exits the substation. The gate closes behind him with a quiet click. He walks south, away from the fire and smoke and destruction, just another Dutch worker heading home after an early morning maintenance call. The rain continues, cold and cleansing. Pieter doesn't hurry. Hurrying attracts attention. He walks at normal pace, a middle-aged man in work clothes carrying a tool bag. Nothing suspicious. He reaches his bicycle, hidden in trees a kilometer from the substation. He secures the tool bag to the rear rack and begins pedaling toward Leiden, toward home, toward his wife, who's probably awake now, wondering where he is. The eastern sky is growing lighter, dawn breaking despite the rain and clouds. Pieter can still see the smoke pillar behind him, visible for kilometers. Every German soldier in the region will see it. Every Dutch civilian will see it and quietly celebrate. Another small victory against an occupation that's lasted 4.5 years. Pieter knows the war isn't over. The Germans have other launch sites, other rockets, other weapons. They'll investigate this disaster, improve their security, make it harder to repeat his success. But for today, for this morning in October 1944, one lineman with wire cutters and electrical knowledge has destroyed a weapon that terrorized millions. Maria is standing at the kitchen window when Pieter arrives home at 07:20 hours. She sees him approach, sees that he's unharmed, and the tension leaves her shoulders. She doesn't ask where he's been, doesn't comment on the smoke visible in the northern sky. She simply holds him tightly for a long moment, then releases him and goes to make breakfast. Pieter sits at the kitchen table, still wearing his wet jacket, watching dawn illuminate the room through rain-streaked windows. His body aches from cold and adrenaline exhaustion. His hands still smell of transformer oil and copper. He allows himself to imagine what happened at the launch site in those critical minutes after 06:15 hours. German technicians suddenly seeing control panels spark and smoke. Electric motors screaming as they overload. Fuel pumps failing catastrophically. Spewing propellant. Someone shouting to evacuate. Personnel running from the launch platform as fires spread. Too slow, too late. The vapor reaching combustible concentration. A single spark. Then physics taking over with devastating finality. 13 tons of propellant doesn't explode gently. The Germans at Launch Site Vier experienced what London experiences several times per week. Instant, overwhelming violence from weapons designed purely to destroy. The difference is that the Germans expected to be safe, protected behind their security perimeters and guard posts. They never considered that the electrical system powering their vengeance weapons could become the weapon that destroyed them. 3 weeks after his daughter's death, Pieter Van Dijk has demonstrated that war is not just soldiers and tanks and aircraft. Sometimes it's linemen who understand voltage and phase angles and exactly how to make electrical current flow backward through systems that were never designed for it. Sometimes the most effective resistance comes not from guns but from knowledge. By 0800 hours, German military police are canvassing the region around the launch site, questioning Dutch civilians, searching for saboteurs. They will eventually reach Pieter's home. He's prepared. His story is simple and verifiable. He was performing routine maintenance at substation Katwijk West, noticed a power fluctuation, investigated, and returned home. Standard overnight work. He has maintenance logs to prove it. The Germans will find his modifications eventually, but the evidence is ambiguous enough to create doubt. Criminal sabotage or maintenance error. With the launch site destroyed and records burned, who can prove intent? Pieter knows he might not survive German investigation, but sitting at his kitchen table, drinking coffee his wife prepared, watching daylight strengthen outside, he feels something he hasn't felt in 3 weeks. Not peace, exactly. Not justice, but completion. He identified a problem, calculated a solution, and executed it with precision. One rocket that won't kill civilians. One small action multiplied by electrical physics into strategic effect. In the following weeks, German investigators will determine that a power surge destroyed equipment at Launch Site Vier, causing the catastrophic propellant explosion. They'll attribute it to grid instability, possibly resistance, sabotage of electrical infrastructure. They'll improve security at remaining launch sites add backup power systems, install better protective devices, but those improvements take time and resources. Each day of delay means rockets that don't launch, casualties that don't occur. The mathematics favor the resistance. One man, one night, one electrical modification, versus dozens of German engineers, thousands of man-hours, and massive resources required to secure every substation and power line in occupied Netherlands. Pieter Van Dijk will continue his work as a lineman, maintaining high-voltage systems, occasionally finding opportunities to make those systems work exactly wrong at precisely the right moments. The Germans will never prove his involvement in the Launch Site Vier disaster. The evidence is destroyed, scattered across Dutch dunes along with the fragments of their vengeance weapon. Years later, after liberation, after victory, historians will document V2 attacks and calculate casualties. They'll note that Launch Site Vier experienced catastrophic propellant explosion on October 7, 1944, attributed to equipment failure. They won't know about Pieter's copper cable bridge, his mechanical timer, his backfeed circuit that sent power flowing backward through German systems. But some forms of resistance don't need historical documentation. They succeed simply by stopping weapons from reaching their targets, by saving lives that will never know they were saved. Pieter's daughter won't return. The V2 that killed her can't be stopped retroactively. But perhaps the rocket that didn't launch on October 7th would have killed someone else's daughter, someone who lived because a lineman understood electricity better than the engineers who designed vengeance weapons. It's a small comfort, but sometimes, in occupation and war, small comforts are all that exist. Pieter finishes his coffee and begins removing his wet work clothes, preparing for the day ahead. He has maintenance calls to make, legitimate work that maintains his cover, and he has schematics to study, mapping other German installations, identifying other opportunities where electrical knowledge might create strategic impact. The war continues, but so does the resistance, waged not just with weapons but with wrenches and wire cutters, by men who know which circuits to connect and which to leave open, who understand that sometimes the most devastating attacks come not from destruction, but from making systems fail exactly when failure matters most.